Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul in the Kitchen, Part 2 today. Today is Tuesday, March the 9th. Now, I just did a little half-hour show that we posted where I was making the salad that I make every week with the greens and the hard vegetables. And at the end of the show, I went over to show you the little chart with the three Ayurvedic types on it, and I didn't come off. I didn't move the camera off of it for the last 2 minutes. And it felt embarrassingly bad, so I wasn't sure how to approach this, and I couldn't make the salad over again because I just used all of my vegetables to do that. I was in the middle of these two other dishes, so what I thought I'd do is I just follow up right now and finish up the two dishes I was making. I won't do it too long, and close up so that we're not closed up with a graphic on the screen. When these things happen, this is my ineptitude with the technology. I'm sort of doing this whole thing myself in terms of the cameras and setting this whole thing up and everything, and I am not editing anything. So I'm basically going live to SD card, or live to tape as the expression would be. So when I finish with this thing, if I screw up or make a big mistake in the middle of it, boom, it's there, and either I do the show over or I leave it. So that's what's going on. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just do a little part two. I'm going to finish up with the three items that I had started with before, and we'll have everything done that we said we started with here at the beginning of the show. So I showed you earlier that we did the buckwheat. So I was going to make the buckwheat with the potatoes. This was the dish I talked about a few times. With the potatoes, the pepper, the onions. So I cooked the buckwheat already. And then I'm going to make the mushroom saute, and I already steamed up blanched the kale. So I'm going to cut the potatoes just to get them started. After you've cooked the potatoes, and you're going to add them to a dish like this, red potatoes, yellow potatoes. Here, see if you can get the yellow potato looks, this one right, that's the yellow potato, that's the red potato. The yellow potato looks a lot nicer. Got a nicer finish to it. It's not, the red potato has a little bit more of a crumbly interior. I generally, when I'm cooking these potatoes, I almost always use two different types to see how they came out that week, because I'll notice that seasonally they will change also. What's happening with them will change as the season. So maybe in a month or so these might look better than these. I don't know, but maybe we can keep our eye out on it and we'll see. So I started that lets the steam out. They're a little bit too soft to cut all the way, and they'll crunkle up, and I'll wind up with mashed potatoes. So I like to give them a few slices so they air out, and then they start to get a little bit firm, and then we've got a nice little chunk when we add it. I usually use yellow onions, but I only had half of a yellow onion here in the house today, and I did all the shopping yesterday, so I had a red onion. I'm going to put a red onion in. I've never made the dish with a red onion before, but we will today. I don't think it'll be the worst thing in the world, and I share this with a few other people. I generally make this, and I'll make some for a few people that I work with downtown, and they love it. They love the dish, and I'll give with the red onion. We'll see if they notice a difference. So we're going to cut all these things up, and I'm just getting these steamed out of the way so that I can work with them. They're a little bit too hot to work with right now all the way. The onions are a little bit hot too. The pepper was the first thing I actually took out, so the pepper is not that hot. The pepper takes maybe 10 minutes in the at 350 in the toaster oven, whereas potatoes and the onions are in for a solid half hour, maybe a little more, maybe 20 minutes on the pepper. I said red pepper. This is an orange pepper. So the peppers go from red, orange, yellow, green, and they all start off green, and as they sit on the vine and continue to ripen, that's how they get to be red. So it's all basically the same thing to start with. But like I said, it sits on the vine and it gets to be red as it goes along. I'm going to push this over to the side here. I'll get out another little chopping block, and I'll use that for the mushrooms. Where did we put the mushrooms? Here they are. Okay. Now, these are chef sampler, pretty much almost medicinal mushrooms. If you get out one of your little mushroom books and you start looking up the different mushrooms, the shiitakes are really medicinal. The Crimea not so much. So the trumpets and the oysters and these lion's manes are way more medicinal, and they have a lot of interesting health benefits that literally range from increasing your energy levels to being good for your heart. The only thing I like to get rid of on the mushrooms, see, the mushrooms, they grow on the very ends of it there. I'll get rid of a little bit of that. They grow on these, they generally have these channels in warehouses, literally in warehouses. They have these channels that are covered either with dirt or with cardboard or sawdust types of things. And that's what the mushrooms grow on. So the very base stem of it is a little grungy looking, not terribly, but a little bit. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't take a whole lot to get these little trumpet guys down. Okay, so I got the frying pan over here, and there's no doubt I'm not gonna cook mushrooms in butter. I will start with butter, and I'll add a little bit of my cooking oil to the butter. And as I've said before, the cooking oil I use is the combination of coconut and sesame, 50-50, raise them to high temperatures, and it produces a neutral taste. So you don't get the really strong taste of the sesame or the strong taste of the coconut. When you merge them together 50-50, you get a pretty neutral flavor, and you can raise it to a high temperature. So it's an ideal cooking oil. Now, I guess I should have probably had the larger chopping block for this, but let's see. We'll get this in. Crank it up a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to use all of these. I'm going to hold off on these trumpets, I think. I don't want to go too much. I want to keep the dish proportional, is what I'm saying. So between the kale and the mushrooms, I don't want the mushrooms to overpower the kale. I would rather the kale overpower the mushrooms. And the reason is I like the kale more than I like, generally speaking, the mushrooms. And the kale, I talked about it earlier, the kale, you don't want to eat kale every day. You don't want to have like a bowl of kale. A kale salad 7 days a week is not good. The amount of kale I use is minimal compared to the overall dishes that I'm making, and it's 50% of this dish. Kale is an accumulator, and if you eat too much raw kale as part of your daily diet, which a lot of people got into about 5, 6, 7 years ago. There was even an article called Peak Kale in Good Magazine, I believe. So, okay, so we got these guys starting to saute a little bit, and they're going to simmer around and saute for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to add the kale, and I'll just cut the kale up right now on the small chopping block in spite of the fact that it's the wrong one. So when I do the kale, I sort of, you can either wring it out before or after a little bit. I like to wring it out. You could just soak it in the water to blanch it, and after I dice it up, you could wring it out again if you want. So what I'll do is I'll come down it, just make a bunch of longitudinal cuts. So I'm trying to basically get this thing diced up to a decent small bite-sized bites. All right. Perfect. Perfect. Scoop it up, bring it out a little bit. And I'm going to leave it on the parchment paper over here for the time being. I want the mushrooms to saute before I put this in. It's going to take about 10-15 minutes for the mushrooms to saute down. If I add the kale now, it's going to overcook the kale. The mushrooms, they can overcook. But for me, the kale can't overcook. I like the color of the kale to be nice and bright. So when I finish this dish, I pretty much add the kale at the end, stir it in, tiny bit of a saute, and then I take it off the heat. And then I'll store it for the week, and I'll take out small portions as I go along. But I don't want to cook the kale again with this any more than it's already cooked. The other thing we're going to put in there is the turmeric. And turmeric, which I showed you in the last one, the color is just absolutely fantastic on this. So we're going to grate the turmeric. I have this one grater, I use it just for turmeric. I have two graters in the house. This one and a dark blue one. And once you start to use a grater for turmeric, unless it's a steel grater, it's anything ceramic like this, it's going to turn color. It's going to turn color. Your hands turn color. If I go out pretty soon after doing this, somebody will notice that my hands are a little bit on the yellow side. So you got to clean your hands up pretty well. This stuff is really strong. Those nutraceuticals in there, the polyphenols are what causes all this color, and that's what the good stuff is for you, literally. Now, when you're working with this, you also need to put in a little, you know, like calcium needs magnesium to be bioactive. The turmeric needs pepper, black pepper, to be bioactive. And with pepper, once again, you always want to ground fresh pepper. You don't want pepper in the shaker. When it's fresh, the oils get released and it's healing. If it's been sitting in a shaker for a year, it's nutritionally deficient. It actually can cause an irritation, which can get healed with freshly cracked pepper. It'll have the opposite effect. Okay, so we'll get this out of the way, clean up here, over there, and the pine nuts. Pine nuts, we're going to add the pine nuts, the pepper. How much? A sprinkle, a couple of sprinkles. And we'll give this a couple of stirs. Hey, let me turn this around here. That's what we're looking at right now. So as you can see, the mushrooms have reduced to about half the size that they were when I originally put them in there. The mushrooms will reduce tremendously. And I don't think anything enhances mushrooms better than butter. I like butter. So this dish is going to be done pretty short. Not going to take much. Alrighty, let's get back to the buckwheat with the potatoes, the onion, and the pepper. And we'll go with the potatoes first, I think, get them out of the way. So the potatoes have a little bit of a firmness to them at this point, which is, so when you get the potatoes out, you want to immediately, or as soon as you can, cut them in half so that they start to aerate. And once they start to aerate, then a few more minutes, do the other half, and you work your way down with them until you get, so you can cut them and you get pieces. If I didn't do this, this would turn into a mashed potato. Seriously, it would. So, now at the end of the day, all I'm going to do with this whole thing, I'm just going to mix this all together with my hands. Potato. Okay. And keeping my eye on the control board over here, I can see that I didn't turn on the screen or do anything weird. This is the biggest problem I've run into doing some of these shows is putting up a picture of something on a particular screen and then forgetting to take it down because I don't have another person who's monitoring this. Years ago when I did these little shows, I didn't do cooking, but I did a little political show. This fellow used to shoot the show and he used to edit the show. So if there's any big screw-ups, we could cut them out. But what I'm using here is a Mevo camera, M-E-V-O. And the camera, these were created a couple of years ago, And in fact, the company just merged with Logitech. They've been around for a few years. Some young guy in Brooklyn, where else, came up with this. And the camera has a 150-degree angle to it, or lens. So we can go in there and choose any number of different shots within the 150-degree lens. So I can make a shot directly on me or the larger shot. So you've seen the camera move a few times. That's what's going on with this camera. Now the problem is I have not graduated to the editing stage. Therefore, everything I do is live to tape. I've attempted to do Final Cut Pro. I've registered for classes a number of times, and it has never worked out. There are certain things which I am just not good at all under any condition, and that's one of them. Editing, a lot of computer work, talking in computer languages I've never been terribly happy with. Years ago when the computers first came out, I was in undergraduate school in the 70s, and the computers were first coming out, and I actually took a computer class, and for the term project we added 1 and 1 equals 2 in assembly language, which probably took about a whole page of notations, literally a page of notations to get it out. Assembly language. And at one point when I was working for AT&T, it was a decision to work in the office where they did this type of work into an office where they did more engineering kinds of work, which was a little bit more liberal, more thinking, and less of this, you know, didactic drilling into the weirdness of computers. Anyway, the people that were doing the spreadsheets and everything, I walked into the office and it looked like a scene from The Wall. People lined up in desks, 3 or 4 in a row, one after another, pages with on the page. I mean, it was so boring looking, I couldn't believe it. I walked out and I said, this is not for me. All right, let's see what we're going to mix that up. And this guy is totally done. In fact, I overdid it a little bit. What I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to add this to it. Yeah, that's a good proportion. It's a little bit more kale than there is mushrooms here. And if you work with the frying pan and you get a little bit too much, you start to burn the bottom of it a little bit, just get some water in there and stir it up. It'll right away just take care of that little burn that was on the bottom. It wasn't burnt. It was just sort of a little overcooked. All right, there's the dish. I'll bring this up. The mushroom, the kale, the turmeric, and the pine nuts and the black pepper. Excellent. Excellent. And the last one here. Now, normally I would have mixed this in a larger bowl. Having said that, the larger bowl was used for the salads and everything just a few minutes ago, so it hasn't been available. So I'm just going to do it by hand in the bowl. I'm going to keep it in for the week. And very good. Very good. We did it. Alrighty. And I'll show you this guy. Alright, so that's the buckwheat potato red or orange pepper dish. Earlier we did the hard vegetables, the fennel, celery, red pepper, my mix of green vegetables, the leafy greens, which included spinach, arugula, radicchio, frise, and dandelion. Dandelion, really, really good. And we're going to add a little cucumber and jicama at the end of the day to this whole final dish. Alrighty, that's it for today. I just wanted to clear that up so that I didn't end on a note where I had a graphic in front of you. I'd rather have food in front of you. I feel better. I hope you feel better. Peace, patience, persistence, and thanks for tuning in.